Hello, folks, and welcome to Life Unfiltered. Phoenix is having technical issues right now, so we'll see how she's coming along with it. But we want to welcome everybody here to the show. So let's see here. Let's see. Uh, Hi, Bill, and everybody put prayers out for the folks down in Texas. It's a bad situation down there with that flooding where everybody was lost. But like I said, I'm waiting for Phoenix to jump in. She was having microphone issues, so hopefully she gets that straightened out, and we'll see how things are going. Bill, how have you been doing up there? Everything going up good in your part of the country? But yeah, it's just a bad deal down there that happened down there in the flooding. I guess there's still got about 161 people still missing in the flooding area down there that they're still looking for. So, oh, really, Bill? Okay, we'll see how Phoenix is coming along now.
How about now?
Perfect. I don't know what you did, but you don't sound like you're in a tin can.
I crawled under my desk and unplugged just about everything.
Something was messing up.
Oh my
Can you
gosh.
hear me fine?
You're fine. Yes.
Okay. I told everybody you was having a little technical issue with your microphone. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's hard for me to get down under there and back in that. My monitor's in the far back corner.
right.
I've got an L shaped desk and it's way back in that corner. So took me a second. I'm sweating now. That was a workout.
She got her workout for the day, folks.
Hi, Bill. Um, okay, but that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything's good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just telling everybody to put their prayers out for the people in Texas down there.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of videos of people putting out a lot of hate content about these children based
Yes,
on race.
right.
And, I was really doing a lot of thinking about stuff because it just seems like I see so much hate coming from so many people about so many issues. And I don't remember seeing so much hatred until the last several years.
Right.
And maybe a lot of that is because of social media. Maybe there was more than what I realized, which probably is true to some extent. But it just seems like it's really on the rise lately, and not just about this. I was kind of blinded even on more the conservatives, I guess, too, because in my mind, exactly, Bill, but in my mind, I guess I wanted to believe that because more conservatives stand on more godly principles and family and things, even if they don't believe in God, they still stand more on godly principles, if that makes sense.
Right.
And I guess I just looked at people who are more on the conservative side as, I don't want to say better, that's not necessarily the right word, but I don't know the word I'm looking for. I just thought they were better than a lot of the judging and hate that I've seen in the last several years. Um, and here lately, it's been so disheartening I see people respected and listened to talk about how people are brainwashed for their opinions if we don't agree with them on the bill that was just passed or on the Ukraine Russia war or Israel or whatever it is. I mean, I'm seeing so much venom and anger coming from even more of the conservative side of people. And I have friends who were who can't stand Trump. Calling Trump supporters a cult and all this stuff. Um, well, no, I get that, but I'm talking my friends,
Right.
who are spewing this stuff. That's what's really getting to me is that these people that I have known or respected or whatever, now some of the people that I see so much anger in them. And when they talk, it's nothing but anger and venom just because we don't agree on every issue, and that's been so disheartening. Um, I and it really started for me, seeing it not across the board, but a little bit under Obama, more with race relations. I really felt like Obama had a great opportunity to help push more healing between the races, being as he was biracial. And he didn't do that. He helped push the divide, but it's just seems like it's escalating and just been so disheartening. And some of the views that we're supposed to be brainwashed about and all these whatever other things that you want to say are because of beliefs that I hold. And I'm sitting here looking at my friends' posts and things like, you have no idea what you're talking about to think that. I have a brain
Mm-hmm.
and I come to my own conclusion for my own reasons, and how disgusting, to have our society going the direction that it is. And, I talked to Bill a little bit, not in great, depth, but just, kind of mentioned a couple comments here and there, even, just about the show and, are we really even doing any good? Are we even reaching people? You know, um, yeah, I agree, Bill. Yeah. Um, you know, it's just, I was talking to someone, on the phone the other day, and I said, I'm getting to the point that I just am finding I want less and less to do with people.
I know what you mean.
And I have gone from being very much a social butterfly, always having cookouts, having friends and family over. I thrived on that. I always had the space for a lot of people. So my house was the place to go to, and we would swim and do cookouts and just have a great time. And I've seen over the last several years, I've just closed up more and more and more and more. And that's where I'm at, Bill. And yet I don't want to be completely antisocial, but I just, I've really been struggling to wrap my head around some of the realizations. And I know people aren't perfect. We all fail. I don't expect this to be perfect, but like I said, when I see people that I really respected and really, put thought into what they were saying. And now there's just so much venom spewing from their mouths that I'm like, I can't even listen to you anymore because there's no reason or real logic in what you're saying anymore. It's just emotion just pouring out, and it's just hateful, and that's been a struggle for me.
Well, I know what you mean. It's hard to even talk to people anymore about what's going on and stuff. You know, like when I'm on the food truck, I leave politics completely out of it
Right.
and stuff. And, you know, when I'm out walking around, talk to people, I tell them I do podcasts and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
But that's about as far as it goes anymore
Yeah.
because a lot of them don't care what's going on.
Mhm.
And like you said, there's so much hate coming out over this deal down there in Texas.
Right.
I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos on it from people I trust and everything, and watching the comments in there, and there is a lot of bad comments coming through, a lot of
Mhm.
hateful comments and stuff. But you
And
know, and it's a lot of it is towards the children, but they got to realize there's only so far 24 children that we know of, that we know of,
right.
and stuff. There's still 161 campers, people living in the small towns down there along that river and everything. The human race,
Mhm.
regular people that got swept away by this flash flood. And I mean, there was nothing they could do about it. When you get 22 inches of rain in 45 minutes,
Mhm.
it's going to go somewhere. It's going to come down as a wall of water. It's going to look like a tsunami.
Right. Well, and I've been seeing a lot of stories about how a couple of days before that the rain was coming down blue, and apparently government officials are not denying this, but they're saying it's not from cloud seeding. They're saying
Well,
from gases in the atmosphere and stuff.
if
Well,
you would have listened to our podcast we just had an hour ago, we had a lady on there that does the weather, right? There was cloud seeding 2 days before this happened, right?
right.
Well, cloud seeding had already dissipated, and cloud seeding only will increase a storm by 20%, is all it does, right? So the cloud seeding doesn't really have anything to do. What it was there was a pressure system right there that was hot. If it would have stayed hot when it collided right there, it wouldn't have rained as much.
Hmm.
But because it didn't stay hot and it cooled down, okay, it cooled
Sorry.
down. That changed everything. That's when the rain just started just coming down, coming down.
Right.
And you look at the lady that was in charge of that campground. They had her on the news talking to her. She had been on the phone with the sheriff's department several times that night getting reports, to see what it was going to do, what it was going to do, and they said nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about,
Hmm.
and stuff. And then at 3:30 in the morning, it hit, you know,
Right.
and stuff. So she did what she could do, her and her husband, and then her husband died saving some of the kids there. But yeah, it's just a bad, you know. You look at this, not only that storm, you look at some of these tornadoes we've had here lately and stuff. We've been lucky where I live at. We have been split. It either goes north of us up into Iowa and across that way, or goes bottom side Joplin and across
Hmm.
and stuff. And they've had some pretty doozy tornadoes here
Right.
lately.
Yeah. I don't I don't personally think that was a completely normal storm. I I think there's something up with it because that is an awful lot of rain
It's an
to
awful
come
lot of
down
rain.
in that amount of time. Bill, about one of your comments, you said, "Man, I have got to get glasses again." Um, I still have not replaced the glasses my grandson broke. Um, you said that um, you said you talk to people that don't do shit for research. Um, Two the people do, and that's part of what's been so disheartening is because two of the people are people that I really respected what they had to say and really, thought they were on track with stuff. And I'm not saying they're wrong about everything they're saying by any means. That's not what I mean when I say I thought they were on track, but we don't agree on every topic. And when I just hear what seems like nothing but anger after a time, it kind of starts to affect you if that's what you listen to all the time. It's just people spewing anger and venom.
Hmm.
And, it's where I finally had to say, I've got to be done listening to you for a while because I've got to take care of myself and my family. And I kind of shut my phone off to a large degree there for a couple of days and just focused on my family. Um, I didn't I didn't look into a whole lot. I kind of skimmed some things. Bill would send me something here and there. Um, and I would check that out. It's not that I didn't keep up with anything, but I just was like, I just need to take some time to focus more on my family and not get caught up in because I would find myself listening to some of this and then I'm getting off of their lives and I'm in a bad mood and angry now because I'm sitting here like, dude, you're talking about me,
Hmm.
you know, because you're talking about people who have this opinion. I'm one of those people. You're talking about me in a very disrespectful and kind of degrading way, because I do look into things. I come up with my own conclusions and stuff. I'm not sitting here brainwashed and I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to be right about every single thing, but I really try to look into stuff before I say it and try to be as accurate as I can. And if I don't know something, I'm going to tell you I don't know. I have an opinion based on limited information that I have, but my opinion could change with more information. And I might do that, but I've always tried to come on these shows and differentiate what I'm saying is a fact versus something I'm not really sure about, you
Right.
know. And so yeah, Bill, we don't always agree. We usually do, but yeah. No, and I will say Bill and I have never been disrespectful to each other, even if we don't agree. Carl, you and I have never been disrespectful.
Right.
Now, I've been told I can be a little blunt and rude. I mean, I remember one time on the show, somebody had a problem with what I was saying. And I finally just had to say, okay, well, be offended.
That's what you got to do. Everybody has their own
I
opinion.
mean, it is what it is. And, I told my husband, I said, I think as I get older, I'm just going to be, more of one of these crotchety old women. And my kids were sitting out back with me and they all looked at me and say, gonna be. And I said, well, yeah, because I'm already seeing it. And I said, I don't want to be rude or disrespectful. That's not my intent. But I'm finding the older I get, the less patience I have for some things. And in other things, I have more patience. It just depends. But there's some things I just don't have as much patience for. I'm kind of over feeling like we're supposed to cater to everybody's feelings. At some point, facts have to matter. It's not that people's feelings don't matter at all. We can have empathy and we can sympathize and all this stuff, but that can only go so far. And then facts have to come in and play a role as well.
Right.
And so that's where I'm like, look, I just I'm not gonna sit here for an hour and just stroke your hair and just play
Right.
into your feelings about something, and like the facts of the situation don't have anything to do with it.
No. It's like I said, everybody has their own opinion and stuff. And if you don't like somebody's opinion, just turn it off and don't listen. That's the easiest way to do it.
Uh,
Yeah, I
Bill,
agree. Well, TikTok, I hate it.
yeah, Bill, you've done that for me before, and I appreciate it. Yeah, TikTok can be a pretty nasty place. Sometimes I like to do what I call it screen record if there's something I want to show on here, because I know it's not something you're going to have to fight after the show, or it shouldn't be, because TikTok we can repost, and I mean that's what it is a place where we can publicly share and stuff. So I feel pretty confident that if I find what I'm looking for and I screen record it and you show it on here, you're not going to get a hold of me later and say, I had to fight that, for copyright or for this or that. So I do think there's some benefit to TikTok. I think there's some benefit in showing more sides of a story at times. Um, but yeah, it can be pretty nasty. Yeah, absolutely, Bill. But my heart goes out to these kids, and I pray for my country and my friends, my family, and I mean, I go through a list, and finally, I'm like, okay, Lord, everybody, all my friends and family, close and far. But I also pray for my country pretty regularly, and I've had people say, well, where in the Bible does it say, to pray for your country? Well, I've said before, to people who say Jesus is not political, will show me in the Bible where he was not political and where he didn't want to reach people. We should pray that God works through every one of our politicians to accomplish his will, whether they know they're being used by God or not. I mean, if he can use a donkey, he can even use the worst Democrat, when they're not even suspecting it. But Jesus was very political, and I mean, somebody that I really looked up to, gave a whole thing on here one time about not being political and how wrong it is for Christians to be political. Well, if Christians are not political at all, then we're sitting back and just letting the world and the devil take completely over. And
Right.
Jesus doesn't tell us to do that either. Jesus was a kingmaker. There are several people in the Bible. Look at Ruth. I mean, not Ruth, Esther. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Look at Esther and everything he did through placing Esther as the queen,
Hmm.
and she saved the Jews and stuff. How much more political can you get than placing David as a king, and David got the mantle as a child. And it said that when they went to fight Goliath, and David went to the current king, and asked for permission to go, that the king said, "Hi, Ruth," that the king saw that God had placed the mantle on David even at that time.
Hmm.
you know so there's many other examples of things that Jesus did where it was very political. So, yes, I pray for the politicians on both sides of the aisle, and I pray that God uses them to accomplish His will. I pray for the other countries because they can affect us as well. And you know, I've just been struggling a little bit though with all the hate that I see.
There's a lot of hate out there,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on. I
Uh,
mean, you can't turn on anything anymore without hate being involved. Look at what they're doing, going after the cops.
right.
I mean, it seems like it's open season on law enforcement.
Hmm.
And I mean, the hate that is out there that has been created.
Right.
Like I said, people have their own opinions, but those opinions there go against our country
Right.
and what we stand for, you know. And I mean, it's sad to see, you know. Like
Right.
we pray for our leaders, our country. I pray for the law enforcement all the time
Right.
because nowadays, you say goodbye at the house. You don't know if you're coming back home,
Right.
and it's getting worse and worse. I mean, you look at the story. You follow that sheriff down in Florida, Grady.
Yeah. I like
Sunday, Sunday, he was in a church talking to the congregation. Right? Was up there talking. His phone kept beeping and beeping, and he's looking around, and he sees a guy get up and walk out of the church and go out of the church. He's talking a little bit more. He sees the guy come walking back in and sit down. His phone keeps going off, getting text messages and text messages. So finally, he picks up his phone and looks at it, puts his phone down, and goes, "That's all I've got to say to the congregation today." He gets down, walks down the aisle, gets up there to where the gentleman walked into the seat,
Mhm.
stops, turns, walks in there and pulls his gun out. The guy sitting next to him is the guy's brother that got up and walked out. He's wanted for murder. He arrested a murderer in church
Wow.
without incident and everything. And he was talking about it on his show, how he does
Hmm.
his show and everything. He goes, "That's a first." But what had happened, the deputies they've been looking for this guy, and they had contacted his brother, got his phone number, and contacted him and told him, pinged him where he was at, had him come out and asked him if his brother was inside, and he said yes. They said, "Okay, he's wanted for murder. Just go in and sit down. Don't cause no problems, because we're out here and stuff." So that's when he was getting all these text messages. But that just goes to show you. I mean, any place, any time.
Right.
I mean, Grady had no idea until he got that text message on his phone
Yeah.
and stuff. But
Well, the other thing that's really kind of been concerning, is to see all the narratives pushed on the conservative side as well.
right,
And I've had to tell people, without proof of something, I cannot come on here and state something as a fact without proof.
mm,
Um, and sometimes it is just that, it's just a narrative, because like I said, people are people. If we don't like a person, we don't like a business or whatever, it's easy to hear something and just run with it and
hmm
not look into it. And sometimes we've got to look into something, um, and I saw that, happening not too long ago with the Christy Walton stuff, and there's still no evidence that's come out. She's been looked into, Walmart's been looked into. She's been very adamant she's separate from Walmart, nothing there. But yet everybody was running with it.
Hmm.
Based on what? You
Based
know,
on a name. That's it.
exactly. The Muslim stuff going on. I actually had someone message me and basically tell me how wrong I was to say that they were trying to build an epic city and bring in Sharia law and stuff. And I'm like, no, they are wanting Sharia law implemented here.
Hmm.
Like I'm not coming on here and just pulling this out of my backside. Trust me, I've looked into this, and I was basically accused of pushing propaganda. And I'm like, no, I try to be very careful before I come on here and speak on something. And if I find out I'm wrong about something, I try to make sure I come right back on and I correct that.
Hmm.
Um, because if I don't do that, no one's going to listen to me.
Right.
You know? Um, but I sent videos and I was told, well, you can't listen to mainstream news. Do you? And I'm sitting here looking at this message like, do you know who you're saying this to? This shows how little you know about me if you're having to tell me not to watch mainstream news here.
Right.
You
Right.
know, like, okay. And so I had to sit there and think a minute, like, how do I say this, respectfully, And I basically just messaged back and I said, no, these are interviews with these Muslim leaders. And I'm not, let me clarify, not all Muslims, not all Muslims, but we do have some Muslim extremists, But no, I'm not trying to say Muslims like every single Muslim in America is some radical Looney Tunes, not by any means. Um, But I said, some of these Muslim leaders who are wanting to build these epic cities and all this stuff, they're coming right out and saying it. I said, I'm hearing it straight from the horse's mouth in interviews, or they're posting videos on their own social media. But I mean, it's still coming from them, not from this person to this person to this person, etc. And she said, well, send me the videos. I sent them. To this day, I've heard nothing from this person. Nothing.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't have to disappear.
Right.
You can still talk to me, but, at some point, again, facts have to matter. We can't just run with narratives, and we can't just spew anger and hatred all the time. It's okay to be angry. Bill made the comment that Jesus was not always nice. Jesus never sinned in his anger. The Bible gives examples where he was angry, and Jesus even turned the tables upside down when he went into the tabernacle and saw them turning it into a business.
Right.
He got mad. He turned the tables upside down. But Jesus didn't sin in his anger. And, it's just been so disheartening to see one where our country's going as a whole. But when I see so many people that I know on some level have respected, um, and I see them falling into these traps, and it's really had me kind of pull back a lot. and question myself because I don't want to fall into the traps either,
Right.
and I know from time to time I probably do fall into something and I've got to pull back and say, Lord, forgive me because I'm not perfect either.
Right. None of
Um,
us are.
but it's just, sometimes it's hard to get on here, and wonder, are we even reaching people or
You
are
you
people
never know.
blinded, you know?
Never know.
My daughter, Emily, was here for the fourth, and she has a neighbor that has started talking to her,
Hmm.
and I asked her, I said, "Is he legal?" She said, "I don't want to ask." And I said, "But you had the perfect opportunity to address it because they were talking about things that their families would like or not like if they started seeing each other." And I said, "Well," I said, "a good way to bring that up, would be to say, look, my family's not racist. We're a very mixed family, You don't have to worry about racism in my family. And I will say it doesn't matter who it is in my family. I haven't met a racist person yet in my family. None of us were raised that way. But I said, just tell them that's not something you have to worry about. But tell him the only thing that he might ever hear from your mother is that I think if people are going to immigrate here, they need to do it legally."
Right.
And I stand by that. Do
I
it
do
legally.
too.
But to hate people, no, I don't hate people, because of your skin color, or your political beliefs, or, nothing that, like, no, not at all. So she called me and she said, "We had that talk, and he said he's legal, but some of his family is not." And he told her that, because Trump hates brown people and wants all brown people removed from the country, that, he's kind of nervous about getting into a relationship with her and then just being ripped away. And I'm like, what?
But
Trump hates brown people and wants all brown people gone. And
no, he don't.
so she said he was showing her a lot of stuff on TikTok and Facebook and stuff where a lot of this is really being pushed. And she said, Mom, I had no idea that this stuff was so bad. And she said he and his family genuinely believe this because this is all they keep being fed, the algorithms and stuff. And she said, but I tried to talk to him a little bit. And he said he would be a little more open minded to hearing me. But, again, I guess the question comes down to, how do we combat some of this? How do is does anybody see us getting back to a more normal place, or just getting
No,
worse?
it's gotten way out of hand. We'll never get back to what we know, you and me know is normal.
Yeah,
You're right, Bill. The
yeah,
ones that want to be, if they self deport themselves, Trump said they could come back through the ports and apply legally.
right.
That's not a problem. It's the ones that don't want to deport and want to stay here.
Hmm.
They're not going after, how do I put this? They're going after the criminal aspect in the illegals that came across the border right at the
Right,
moment and stuff. The others, they're not putting a big force in going after them yet. So if they were smart, they would deport themselves back to Mexico, and then just walk through the port and apply for U.S. citizenship.
right. Well,
What's the difference? You know,
like I told her, this guy, I think she says from Guatemala, and I said, look, he's already got a U.S. birth certificate, social security card and everything. He was born here. Nothing's going to happen to him.
No.
Even if we get rid of birthright citizenship, he's not going to be included in that.
Right.
They're not going to go retroactive, back however many years. It's going to start, from a certain date moving forward. I said, so that's not something he has to worry about. But like I said, I would just like to think that people who say they are more conservative or God fearing, especially if they claim to be God fearing people, that they would think more about what comes out of their mouth before they open it.
Right.
Because if you believe in God and genuinely believe in God, not just that, oh yeah, I believe in God, like there's just some God out there in the ethos somewhere, which is what I think a lot of people mean. But I mean, genuinely believe in God. One day we're all going to stand in front of Him, and the Bible says we're going to be held accountable for every word that we speak, even our idle words. And that's why God says so much to watch your tongue and compares our tongue to a sword. And I will say, I am also kind of preaching to myself on that one. I was never a big girl, until I had Onyx. I weighed 100 pounds, 5'3", 100 pounds. I had to be pregnant to break 100 pounds. And I mean, all the protein shakes and whatever else I did me no good. Actually, after Brisea, she was baby 10, I weighed 115 pounds after her. But I had to have 10 babies to get up to 115. And, I was able to maintain that for a little while. But because, my point was I was always very tiny and petite. So I wasn't some badass, walking around able to get into fights and beat on people and stuff, but what I had, if you made me really mad, was my mouth. And I knew how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said so many times on this show that I really regret a lot of what I have said to people. And I've had to ask God for forgiveness because every once in a while something will creep up in my head that I haven't thought about in years. And I'm like, oh man, I did that. I said that. And I just have to stop it. I'm like, Lord, forgive me. I hope that person is not still walking around with some kind of damage because of what I said, forgive me. But the thing is, we don't know. We
Right.
don't know what we do and say to somebody and how it's going to affect them, and not just as a person, but we're seeing it, or we're seeing that words can affect people on a national or worldwide level, not just individually. And so I think that's what was so disheartening is because I see so many people saying I believe in God and yet there's just so much venom and stuff coming from them. And it's just been very disheartening, and I don't know how we go back to any kind of normalcy, or if we do.
I don't think we will. The world has made a big change in the last 4.5 years.
Hmm.
Very big change.
Right.
And I don't see it going back to the way it was. We'll even go back 10 years ago. It won't go back to that at all.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it used to be the they worried about racism in this country. The biggest thing to worry about now is not racism, it's hate. There's more hate in this country than there's ever been before.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, racism is hate, but it was just one
Yeah,
category. Now it's just hate across the board.
exactly.
And I see, with some of the change, I uh, I see so many people talking about things that, for example, the Israel and Palestine stuff. And people think that if you say you support Israel, that you're saying you just support the government and everything they do. No, not necessarily. Hi, baby. Good night. I'll be
Night, bud.
in a minute. Bye bye.
Night.
Good night. Can you close that door? Ken's outside the door. Tran, get over here. you know, I support Israel based on my own reasons. But that does not mean that I support the government and everything the government's doing. And I get
Exactly.
so tired of hearing the government of Israel today is not the government of the Bible. Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's 2025. But what does that have to do with supporting Israel? You know, part of my deal is knowing a lot of the history between Palestine and Israel, and saying, like, why is it always Israel who's expected to give up land? You know, always. They had the land originally. That was their land.
Right.
And they're the only country that's never supposed to keep it. And this is before the current government. And people say, well, Israel wasn't even a state until 1946.
Something like that.
They were there long before that, but then they got run out,
Right.
and they finally got to come back. You know, um, I support the people, and I know there's controversy among people on what Scripture says as far as the scriptures that say those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse Israel will be cursed, and some people say it's Israel, the country, not the government. Let me be very clear, not necessarily the government, but the people, the land. And some people say, no, Israel's the church. But when I read the scriptures that they give to support that, well, first off, we got to remember that a lot of our doctrines and teachings that have been passed, come from men who have sat down and pulled this scripture and this scripture and this scripture and come up with the Baptist and the Methodist and the Pentecostal. And that's how we have so many, and they ignore everything else in the Bible. And that's why, when people ask me, are you Christian or whatever, I don't even like saying yes, because I feel like that's getting more into just being religious, and we're not supposed to be religious. God condemns being religious. He wants us to have a relationship with Him, and He says to study and show yourself approved, which means go to the Bible yourself. Because being raised Baptist for so many years, I got a lot of good foundation. But there was a lot of stuff in the Bible that they left out that
Mm-hmm.
I was never taught, or I was taught was a sin. And yet when I pull out the Bible and read it, I'm like, oh, well, that's not what it says, you know. And then I've been to Pentecostal churches and Lutheran church, and and it's the same thing. And each one wants to put God in a box. God does not fit in a box,
Mm-mm.
you know. And when I read through Revelations, and I love Revelations, I don't know why, but I do. I love the book of Revelations. And I read it and I've heard from pastors, oh, it's such a complicated book. And I'm like, how's it so complicated? Just sit and read it. Forget the training you have where, they're trying to keep you in this little box and, get out of that and just read it. And when I read that and other scriptures that tie into it, I don't see where Israel is just the church and doesn't mean the country.
Right.
They talk about Gog and Magog coming against Israel, and they describe what happens when they come to destroy them. Israel's not destroyed, God protects them. And it's Gog and Magog who are destroyed. And it gives a description of how long before people can even go into the land. Well, if it's the church, we've got the church here in America, Mexico, other countries down south. We've got Christians who are part of the church in other countries over there. So a lot of things just don't fit for that. So for me, yes, I very much stand, and but that doesn't make me brainwashed. That just means I read my Bible and I either take it as a whole or I don't. I don't get
Right.
to pick and choose which parts of the Bible I believe in, you know. And then I look at history, which I love, and I see the historical stuff going way back. And but that's controversial. Now, if you support Israel at all, it has to be that you're supporting the government and everything they do, and you're brainwashed and hateful and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I just look into things and I come to my own conclusions. And, you know, I, um, I try to explain the book of Q that was taken out of the Bible. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting, Bill, is the things that get removed are not even the things that lead you to Jesus and salvation. Have
Right.
you ever noticed that? That stuff never gets removed. They remove stuff to fit narratives and stuff. Like I have a Geneva Bible and a King James and an NIV, and the more they come out with, the more watered down it gets to where people don't even really know what believe means anymore,
Exactly.
because it's such a watered down version of it. But in my Geneva Bible, you know, Jesus is talking about the governments being corrupt, the kings and governments and everything being corrupt, and King James had that taken out. But that's not what's going to save you. They have the Queen Bible taking out every reference for homosexuality and stuff. There's whole chapters and stuff missing out of it because they don't
Hmm.
want that in there. It doesn't fit the narrative. Now I guess the narrative is to try to tell people Jesus was gay, and I've heard that Jesus was gay and all this stuff, and they took all that out of the Bible. Well, that's going to help you continue to live a sinful life that you're going to be accountable for if that's the Bible you're going by. But it's not going to necessarily keep you from coming to know Jesus. And if you truly come to know Jesus, he can deal with that. If he wants to, he can,
Right.
if you truly open your heart, he can change you. But it's interesting, how they keep trying to remove stuff. And, but, but to me, I think the stuff that actually leads people to Jesus and salvation and eternal life, that stuff's still there. And I don't think that God's going to allow that stuff to be removed. They can distort it and do all kinds of stuff, but I don't think that those core things are going to ever be removed. I just, I don't know. I wish people would just think a little bit more. And, Ukraine and Russia was pushed on us as being this big bad evil for so long. And I remember being little bitty and hearing Russia talked about, by my grandparents and the Cold War and all this stuff and all these conversations. And I'm not saying Putin is great, but now I sit back and wonder, was everything we were told about Russia true? Or was it a lot of narrative? And I see so much support going for Ukraine. And I'm like, how did we suddenly wake up one morning and forget how corrupt Ukraine is? How did they suddenly become our ally? And it's just, I see the population just being led around by the nose, and nobody sits back and questions anything, beyond just if you have a difference of opinion on some of these topics, you know, they'll question you and what's wrong with
Right.
your head.
Right.
But, you know, my main questioning is, for people in general is just, hopefully people start waking up that we are being led by narratives and stuff, by our own country, by other countries. People are allowing themselves to be used to push false narratives and agendas, and we're not using critical thinking anymore.
That's true. That's true.
Well, and that's true. But and there's a big narrative. Oh, poor Ukraine, just sitting there, and one day they just got invaded. No. Russia warned and warned and warned and warned. And technically, we broke treaties as well that we signed, and Russia could have gone to war with us. And Putin said, I don't want that because it will be nuclear, and who's going to win?
Right.
Nobody. Nobody's truly going to win. I'm going to have a destroyed country. You're going to have a destroyed country. And who wins when two countries are completely demolished and decimated? Nobody wins. But Ukraine is on their borders, and they broke a lot of treaties, and they got, I don't know how many warnings. I mean, I can go back and count. They got warning after warning. Other countries warned,
Phoenix.
invaded. All of a sudden, yeah, all of a sudden the narrative changed, and everybody woke up one morning to, oh, poor Ukraine. And they're one of the leading countries for human trafficking.
Right.
All the money laundering that a lot of our politicians have been doing, you know. Let's look at Zelensky. What a joke. He was an actor. He was just installed in there because
Hmm.
the person who was running against him was killed. You know,
Right.
being an actor in itself is not a bad thing. Donald Trump had a TV show, but we didn't kill Biden when they were running against each other and
No.
installed Trump. Like, there's so much corruption, and it's like people went to bed one day and the world was one way, and they woke up and all of a sudden, no, let's just have all this pity for Ukraine and get involved and spend all of our money over here. And the controversy over the bill that was passed, the big beautiful bill, there's things I love about it, excuse me, and things I'm not so crazy about. But that's going to be true with any bill.
Right.
And that's another topic I see so much hatred over.
I know there's, like we've been talking about, there's so much hatred out here in this, we'll say the world, but
Hmm.
in this country, there is so much going on right now. There's a lot of hatred.
Yeah. And that, I kind of liked in the show on a more positive note, but that's where I was kind of asking, how do we rein some of this back in, where people can just have a difference of opinion on things?
It's going to, I don't know how we're going to do that, tell you the truth, because there's so much arguments between the parties out there.
Mhm.
People arguing about Trump. People arguing now about Elon. and
Mhm.
just everything going back and forth and back and forth. And I'm like, get over the damn drama. Let's get on with our country, get it back
Right.
in order, and get on. Everybody has their own opinion on different things, but the hatred that is out there, we started off the show by talking about the hatred that's been shown down in Texas
Mhm.
and everything. There shouldn't be hatred. We should have love for our mankind
Right.
down and everything, worrying about the 161 people that they haven't found yet, that
Mhm.
they know of, right? I look for that number to rise
Right.
because there was a lot of people vacationing down in that part of the country at campsites that were washed away. They're waiting for their families to notify them, oh, they didn't come back. We didn't know they were down there. So, yeah, right, Bill. That's what everybody's been saying. It's Trump's fault for the
Yeah.
flood. And it that's the farthest thing from the truth, you know, and stuff. But yeah, tonight's show has been about hatred and what we can do to change it in this country. I don't know. I really don't know. And as far as I can see, it's a long ways down the road before it will change.
Yeah, Bill made a comment earlier that he thinks it's going to get worse before
Oh, it's going to get a lot worse.
better.
It's going to
And
get a lot worse.
that's something that I pray about all the time is, that this country starts turning more towards God. And I ask him, I pray, that he has mercy on us. We're all going to have to suffer consequences,
Oh yeah,
Um, and even though I say, I support Israel as a country, even the government, is going to have to face consequences,
yep,
or is Israel God's chosen people? Well, according to the Bible, yes. But that doesn't mean they're free from consequence,
right.
for
It,
wrongdoing.
it
You're
just goes,
going to pass.
and just not them, all the leaders in the world
Right.
of
You know,
every country.
every
They're
one
going to have
of
to face
it.
the judgment.
But I pray, for mercy, because like I pray and I tell God all the time, I said, there's a lot of people here that say they don't believe in you, but they still stand on your principles
Hmm.
and honor them, for, that, or show mercy for that, and try to reach them. Um, we were built on godly principles, and I don't want to see that wiped out. That is part of our history. You have the right to believe in God, the right not to believe in God, but don't wipe out the history that this country was founded on godly principles, and they're principles
Hmm.
that are not bad if everybody lived by them, whether they believe in God or not. If everybody truly lived by them, we would be in such a better place.
Right.
The Ten Commandments alone, would put us in
Exactly.
a better place, believing in God or not. But I really, it's been a struggle for me, and sometimes I just have to kind of set the phone down for a while and kind of, if Bill messages, I answer. If you message, I'm going to answer. But there's sometimes I see who's messaging or calling, and I'm just, kids are like, are you going to answer it? No, I don't need to, because I know it's just going to be more spewing of anger and hatred. And that's something that I hope, will start changing, is that we can start seeing people who have a difference of opinion on things not as horrible people. There might be some people who have a certain amount of brainwashing, but just
Yeah.
having a difference of opinion doesn't make everybody brainwashed, maybe uneducated. because a lot of people just want to sit and watch mainstream media and that's their sole source or headlines on things. I've even heard people say, I just scroll through and read headlines and they headlines. So, I think there's a lot of uninformed people. To me, that's factual. But if I say everybody's brainwashed who disagrees with me on everything, well, now I'm kind of crossing a little bit of a line there.
Right.
Um, but that's something that I hope we can, for anybody watching the show or who does watch the show, and, you know, we can start reining some of this back ourselves just in how we talk to people. You're not going to win somebody over spewing hate at them. You're not going to win somebody over spewing insults at them for having a difference of opinion.
Right.
If you're on there, I'm sick of this and rah, 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 and just that's all you're doing. Every single time you open your mouth, that's all people get. Who are you going to reach? Except other angry people who want to get on there and rah rah with you.
Right.
And then all you have is, excuse my language, I'm sitting about God, but I don't know a better word right now, but a bitch fest.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what you want in your life, go ahead. But, hopefully we have people who really want peace in our life, peace in our home. And our home's not just the walls where we sleep every night, because I can be in this house or move to a different house tomorrow. I'm still in this country. This country is my home too. Not just this building, but this country is my home. And hopefully we want peace. And, we've got to start holding ourselves accountable for how we talk to people, how we treat them. It doesn't mean we have to roll over and let them walk all over us and stuff. Of course not. But if we're coming across as angry vipers every time we open our mouth, nobody's going to hear us.
Right.
And we're not going to make a difference.
Right. So, yeah. Anyway, folks, we're going to end the show tonight. And Phoenix, you were lagging there 3 or 4 times. I don't know what's wrong with your internet.
I have no idea. I'm even plugged in.
I know, but you were, and then like that and stuff a couple times. But
Yeah, I
we'll
had
get it
problems
all figured
trying to
out.
get on.
So, everybody have a good evening and catch us next week. Phoenix will have something we'll talk about set up for next week and
Oh,
everything.
well,
So,
Bill can help me out with that.
yeah. And comment down there before we go. Bill said Trump should make me a public speaker. Bill,
We
before
can get
you
you
be,
to come on here.
Bill, before you become a public speaker, you need to come on this show.
Right.
So,
You
think
don't
about
even
it,
have to
Bill.
show your face. You can turn the camera off and just
Yeah,
have your voice.
yeah. So anyway, we'll see y'all next week here on Life Unfiltered. Everybody have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.